Arizona Territory, 1872. The summer heat pressed down on the Superstition Mountains like a blacksmith's anvil, the kind of scorching fury that burned away all softness from the land. Daniel Hayes wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the cattle grazing on his modest spread, the Diamond H Ranch. At 26, he'd carved out a life for himself in this unforgiving country, but the price had been steep, isolation as vast as the desert itself. A man's only true companion out here is his shadow, Daniel muttered to his horse, a philosophy that had served him well since losing his parents to Apache raids as a boy. The frontier had taught him that attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. Better to keep to himself, run his cattle, and leave sentiment to fools back east who'd never known what it meant to fight for survival. As the sun began its descent, Daniel spotted a column of smoke rising from the direction of Whispering Creek, where a small Apache encampment had settled for the summer months. Not his business, he told himself. The uneasy peace between settlers and natives remained fragile at best. Still, something about the thick, black plume troubled him. That was no cooking fire. Against his better judgment, Daniel spurred his horse toward the smoke. Self-preservation had kept him alive this long, but something stronger pulled him forward now, perhaps the last remnant of humanity the frontier hadn't yet burned out of him. When Daniel crested the ridge overlooking the encampment, chaos greeted him. Several wickiups were engulfed in flames, their occupants scrambling to salvage belongings and douse the spreading fire. Without hesitation, Daniel rode down the slope, dismounting near a particularly fierce blaze where several Apache men struggled to control the flames. Through the thick smoke, Daniel heard screams from within the burning structure. An elder Apache man was being restrained by others as he desperately tried to enter the inferno. "My daughter," the man cried in broken English, struggling against those holding him back. Daniel hesitated only a moment before wrapping his bandana around his face and plunging into the burning wickiup. The heat scorched his lungs as he crouched low, eyes stinging as he searched through the smoke. A movement caught his attention, a young woman trapped beneath a fallen support pole, conscious but unable to free herself. Even through the haze, Daniel was struck by her beauty, proud features framed by jet-black hair that fell past her shoulders. She was remarkably tall for an Apache woman, nearly his own height of 6 feet, her frame powerful yet unmistakably feminine. Their eyes met, hers wide with fear but burning with determination. Without words, Daniel lifted the heavy beam, straining against its weight as she pulled herself free. The structure groaned ominously above them. In one fluid motion, Daniel scooped her into his arms and staggered toward the entrance, breaking into the open air seconds before the wickiup collapsed in a shower of embers. As he set her down gently, the Apache woman gazed up at him with eyes as deep and dark as mountain pools. Something shifted in Daniel's chest, a dangerous feeling he quickly suppressed. This wasn't the beginning of anything. In the morning, he would ride back to his lonely ranch and continue as he always had. Alone. "Kachina," the woman said softly, touching her chest. "Kachina Longbow." "Daniel Hayes," he replied, then turned away to help the others fight the fire before she could say anything more. Before she could crack the armor he'd spent years forging around his heart. By nightfall, the fires were extinguished. Daniel declined offers to stay, despite the lateness of the hour. The less entangled he became with these people, the better. As he mounted his horse, Kachina's father, Chief Longbow, approached him with solemn dignity. "You saved my daughter," he said, his weathered face revealing nothing. "Tomorrow, we speak." Daniel nodded curtly, uncomfortable with the gratitude. No need. Anyone would have done the same. As he rode back to his ranch under the star-filled sky, Daniel tried to forget the way Kachina had looked at him, with a mixture of gratitude and something else that made his solitary existence suddenly seem hollow rather than safe. Dawn broke with Daniel already at work mending fences, driving himself harder than usual to outpace his thoughts. The sound of approaching horses pulled him from his labor. Chief Longbow rode at the front of a small delegation, his posture regal despite his advanced years. Behind him rode Kachina, now dressed in a simple buckskin dress, her long black hair plaited with beads that caught the morning light. At 22, she carried herself with a grace that belied her impressive height and strength. Daniel set down his tools, tension rippling through him. Apaches rarely ventured onto white settlers' land unless trouble was brewing. Mr. Hayes, Chief Longbow began, dismounting with the careful movements of age. You saved my daughter from certain death. For this, I am in your debt. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. As I said, anyone would have done the same. No, the chief said firmly. Not any white man would risk his life for Apache. You have shown courage and honor. Kachina watched him with those penetrating eyes, saying nothing but somehow communicating volumes in her silence. She was even more striking in daylight, tall and proud, with high cheekbones and lips that curved slightly upward even in repose. Your actions have changed many things, the chief continued. I have consulted with the spirits, and they have shown me the path forward. Daniel steeled himself. Expecting some token of appreciation, he could politely decline before sending them on their way. Instead, Chief Longbow straightened to his full height. I request that you take my daughter as your wife. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Sir, that's impossible, he stammered, glancing at Kachina, whose expression remained unreadable. It is the greatest honor I can bestow, the chief replied calmly. My daughter is of royal blood. She will bring strength to your bloodline and alliance between our peoples. Chief Longbow, I live alone for a reason, Daniel said firmly. I don't seek a wife, Apache or white. I'm grateful for your offer, but I must decline. Something flickered across Kachina's face. Relief? Disappointment? Daniel couldn't tell, and he forced himself not to care. The chief's expression hardened. You do not understand. The fire that nearly took my daughter was no accident. It was set by men who wished to drive us from these lands. Your fellow white men. What does that have to do with me? Daniel asked, though a sense of foreboding crept up his spine. War is coming, Chief Longbow said gravely. Already, young warriors speak of revenge. But if my daughter were to marry a respected rancher, it would create a bond that might prevent bloodshed. He paused. You saved one life yesterday. Today, you have chanced to save many. Daniel's mind raced. Marriage to a woman he barely knew, an Apache woman, no less, was unthinkable. Yet the prospect of renewed warfare in the territory would mean death for countless innocents on both sides. I need time to consider this, he said finally. Chief Longbow nodded. 3 days. We will return for your answer. He mounted his horse, then added, My daughter will stay to help you understand our ways, to see if there can be harmony between you. Before Daniel could protest, the chief and his men rode away, leaving Kachina standing before him, her expression now openly defiant. I did not ask for this either, she said in carefully pronounced English. I do not wish to marry a man who thinks himself above my people. I never said, Daniel began. You did not need to say, Kachina interrupted. It shows in how you stand, how you look at us. But my father believes this is necessary, so I will honor his wisdom. Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Look, I'm grateful you're alive, but marriage is out of the question. I've sworn never to take a wife. Why? She asked directly. The question, so simple yet so piercing, caught him off guard. Because attachment is weakness out here, he answered finally. Because I've buried enough people I cared about. Something softened in her expression. So you choose to live half alive, like a coyote with one foot in a trap? Her insight stung more than he cared to admit. I choose to survive, he replied tersely. And I do just fine on my own. Kachina looked around the ranch, functional but stark, lacking any touches of comfort or beauty. Yes, she said quietly. I can see how well you survive. For the rest of the day, they existed in uneasy parallel, Daniel continuing his work while Kachina observed silently. As evening approached, he reluctantly showed her to the small spare room where his ranch hand had once stayed before moving on. That night, Daniel lay awake, haunted by memories long suppressed. His mother's smile as she taught him to read by candlelight, his father's strong hands guiding his first attempts to rope a calf. The day he found them both dead, their homestead in ashes. He'd been 15, old enough to survive, but young enough to vow never to risk such loss again. Dawn found him already outside, chopping wood with focused intensity. Kachina emerged from the house wearing the same buckskin dress, but with her hair now loose around her shoulders. Do you always work before the sun rises? She asked. Work doesn't wait, he replied shortly. Nor does life, she countered. Yet you seem determined to wait for both. Before Daniel could respond, The sound of approaching riders drew their attention. 3 men on horseback approached from the east, rough-looking characters whose appearance triggered Daniel's instinctive wariness. "Stay inside," he instructed Kachina, reaching for the rifle propped against the woodpile. "I do not hide from danger," she replied, standing her ground. The riders pulled up short of the house. Their leader, a grizzled man with a puckered scar running down one cheek, spat tobacco juice before addressing Daniel. "Pace," he called. "Heard you've been harboring Apaches." Daniel stepped forward, rifle held casually but ready. "My business is my own, Slater. What brings you to my property?" Jebediah Slater's gaze slid to Kachina, his expression hardening. "Word is you pulled this one from a fire. Seems a waste of effort, considering what her kind did to the Prescott settlement last month." "That was not my people," Kachina said firmly. "Those were renegades from the south." "All savages look the same to me," Slater sneered. "Especially when they're burning homesteads and taking scalps." Daniel moved slightly to position himself between Slater and Kachina. "State your business or move on, Slater. I've got work to do." Slater's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just passing friendly advice, neighbor to neighbor. There's talk of cleaning out all Apache from the territory. Wouldn't want to be caught on the wrong side of that effort." His gaze lingered meaningfully on Kachina, especially not for a savage squaw, no matter how tall or handsome. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. "My land, my rules. I decide who stays and who goes." "For now," Slater replied ominously. "But times are changing, Hayes. Best remember which side you belong on." With that, he wheeled his horse around, his companions following as they rode away. When they were out of sight, Daniel turned to find Kachina watching him with an unreadable expression. "Now you understand my father's concern," she said quietly. "Men like that light fires and blame Apaches. Then they use that fear to justify killing us." "Slater's all talk," Daniel replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "He's been trying to push me off this land for years." "Perhaps," Kachina said, "but his talk becomes others' action." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes. "You saved me from fire. Now my father offers you chance to save many more. Is your solitude worth more than their lives?" The question hung between them, heavier than any marriage proposal. Before Daniel could formulate a response, Kachina turned and walked toward the corral where several horses grazed. "You have strong horses," she observed, expertly changing the subject. "But that paint needs attention." His right foreleg troubles him. Daniel followed, surprised. "How can you tell?" "The way he shifts his weight," she replied, approaching the horse with confident movements. The animal, normally skittish with strangers, lowered its head to her outstretched hand. "I have worked with horses since I was small. My father says I understand their spirits." For the first time since her arrival, Daniel found himself genuinely curious rather than defensive. "Can you help him?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I can try, if you will allow it." Over the next hours, Daniel watched as Kachina worked with gentle expertise, applying poultices made from plants she gathered near the creek. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, her voice a soothing murmur as she spoke to the horse in Apache. By midday, the animal was walking more freely, the pain in its gait noticeably reduced. "That's remarkable," Daniel admitted, offering her water from his canteen. "Where did you learn such skills?" "My grandmother was a healer," Kachina replied, accepting the water. "She taught me to listen to what animals cannot say with words." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an unexpected jolt through Daniel's arm. He withdrew quickly, unnerved by his reaction. "Your ranch needs a woman's touch," she observed, looking around at the sparse homestead. "No flowers, no color, no life beyond work." "I'm not looking to win any prizes for decoration," Daniel replied defensively. "It is not about prizes," Kachina said. "It is about making a place that welcomes the spirit home at day's end, not just the body." The insight struck Daniel with unexpected force. When had his ranch ceased to be a home and become merely a place to work and sleep? Had it ever been a home at all? As afternoon stretched into evening, Daniel found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories of cattle drives and frontier challenges. Kachina proved to be not only a good listener, but also surprisingly well-informed about ranching. When she laughed at his description of chasing a stubborn steer through cactus country, the sound warmed something long cold inside him. That night, as they sat before the fire he'd built outside. Kachina spoke of her people's traditions, of their deep connection to the land that white settlers saw only as property to be claimed and fenced. "The earth does not belong to us," she explained, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. "We belong to the earth. This is what my people understand that yours do not." "Not all white men think alike," Daniel said, surprising himself with the defensiveness in his voice. "No." Kachina raised an eyebrow. "Yet you build fences and say this land is mine alone. You live in isolation and say I need no one. Are these not the ways of your people?" The challenge in her words struck uncomfortably close to truths Daniel had long avoided examining. Before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, hoofbeats approaching in the darkness. Daniel was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Get inside," he instructed, all warmth vanishing from his voice. This time Kachina didn't argue, moving swiftly to the house while Daniel positioned himself in the shadows. The riders, 4 of them, approached cautiously, their features obscured by the darkness. "Hayes," a voice called. "We know you're harboring an Apache. Send her out, and there won't be trouble." Daniel recognized Slater's voice, now thick with liquor and menace. "You're trespassing, Slater. Turn around and ride out while you still can." Laughter greeted his words. "1 man against 4? Those ain't odds I'd bet on." "Then it's fortunate no one asked you to wager," Daniel replied steadily, raising his rifle. "This is your last warning." A shot cracked through the night, splintering wood near Daniel's position. He returned fire, forcing the riders to scatter for cover. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement at the house, Kachina emerging with his old shotgun in her hands. "I told you to stay inside," he shouted as she took position at the corner of the house. "And I told you I do not hide from danger," she replied calmly, firing a blast that sent one of Slater's men diving from his horse. What followed was a tense exchange of gunfire, with Daniel and Kachina holding their positions while Slater and his men attempted to advance under cover of darkness. Despite being outnumbered, they managed to keep the attackers at bay until a lucky shot from Kachina struck one of the horses, creating enough chaos for Slater to finally call a retreat. "This ain't over, Hayes." Slater's voice floated back through the darkness. "You've made your choice, siding with savages against your own kind." When silence finally returned, Daniel approached Kachina, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father believes women should know how to defend themselves," she replied, calmly reloading the shotgun. "Especially when surrounded by those who see us as less than human." Something shifted in Daniel's perception as he looked at her. This woman who had faced danger without flinching, who handled both healing herbs and weapons with equal confidence. She defied every assumption he'd held about Apache women, about women in general. "Are you hurt?" she asked, noticing a tear in his shirt sleeve where a bullet had grazed him. "It's nothing," he said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Kachina set down the shotgun and reached for his arm, her touch gentle but firm as she examined the wound. "Not deep, but it needs cleaning." Inside, she worked by lamplight, cleansing the wound with water she'd boiled with certain herbs. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, her face a study in concentration that Daniel found himself unable to look away from. "Why did you defend me?" she asked suddenly, her eyes still focused on her work. "Those men are your kind. I am not." The question cut through Daniel's defenses like a well-honed knife. "They're not my kind," he replied after a moment. "A man is defined by his actions, not the color of his skin. Yet you live apart from everyone, trusting no one," she observed. "As if all humans are the same threat." Daniel had no ready answer for this insight. As she finished bandaging his arm, their eyes met in the lamplight, and for a moment, all the barriers he'd constructed seemed paper-thin and meaningless. "You should rest," he said finally, breaking the connection. "They might return. And if they do, we will face them together." Kachina replied with quiet certainty. "As we did tonight." "We." The word echoed in Daniel's mind long after they had retired to their separate rooms, disturbing his defenses like ripples across still water. The next morning brought no sign of Slater and his men, but Daniel remained vigilant as he and Kachina tended to the ranch chores. Working alongside her felt strangely natural, her strength and efficiency complementing his own. When she suggested improvements to his irrigation system based on Apache techniques, he found himself listening with genuine interest rather than dismissing her ideas. As the day progressed, Daniel caught himself watching Kachina. The graceful efficiency of her movements, the way sunlight played across her features when she smiled, the quiet confidence with which she approached every task. Something dangerous was happening to his carefully constructed isolation, cracks spreading through walls he'd thought impenetrable. That evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Kachina broke their comfortable silence. "Tomorrow my father returns for your answer," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Have you decided?" Daniel stared into the distance, conflict raging within him. "Marriage should be about more than political alliances or preventing violence," he said finally. "Where I come from, it's about love." Kachina finished when he faltered. "My people believe in love too, Daniel Hayes. But we also understand that some unions begin with duty and grow into affection." She turned to face him directly. "Do you truly wish to live alone until death claims you? To never know the warmth of family again?" Her words probed wounds he'd kept hidden for so long they had become part of him. "I had a family once," he said, the admission wrenched from some deep place. "Apaches killed them when I was 15. Kachina's expression remained steady, though her eyes reflected compassion rather than defensiveness. "And whites killed my mother and brother when I was 12. Does that mean all whites are murderers? Should I hate you for their actions?" The simple logic of her question undermined years of carefully nurtured prejudice and fear. Before he could respond, a distant glow on the horizon caught his attention, torches approaching from the direction of town. "Trouble," Daniel said grimly, rising to his feet. Kachina stood beside him, her expression resolute. "More than trouble," she observed. "That is too many men for simple mischief. They come for blood." Daniel made a swift decision. "Take my fastest horse and ride to your father's camp. Warn him." "And leave you to face them alone?" she challenged. "No, my place is here." "This isn't your fight," Daniel insisted. "It became my fight when they burned our camp," she replied fiercely. "When they threatened you for helping me. I will not run." The determination in her eyes brooked no argument. With grudging admiration, Daniel nodded. "Then we prepare." Working quickly, they barricaded the house, positioning weapons at strategic points and preparing for a siege. As the torches drew closer, Daniel found himself watching Kachina's calm efficiency with growing respect. She moved without fear, her actions precise and purposeful. "Why are you looking at me that way?" she asked, catching his gaze. "I'm trying to understand you," he admitted. "Most people would be terrified." "Fear serves no purpose unless it sharpens your senses," she replied. "My grandmother taught me that courage is not absence of fear, but mastery of it." The approaching mob, at least 20 men on horseback led by Slater, halted at the edge of Daniel's property. Their torches cast grotesque shadows across the land he'd worked so hard to tame. "Hayes," Slater's voice carried clearly through the night. "We're done playing games. Send out the Apache woman, and we'll let you live." Daniel stepped onto the porch, rifle held openly, but not raised. "This is private property, Slater. You and your lynch mob have no business here." "She's an Apache," Slater spat. "They murdered the Henderson family last week. 6 people, including 2 children." "That wasn't her people," Daniel called back. "You know as well as I do that was the work of renegades from the South." "An Apache is an Apache," one of the other men shouted. "They're all savages. The only savages I see are men with torches threatening a woman who's done no harm," Daniel replied, his voice carrying across the yard. "Go home, all of you, before this turns into something you'll regret." Slater's laugh was ugly in the torchlight. "You're outnumbered 20-1, Hayes. Your Apache whore can't save you." "No," came a new voice from the darkness behind the mob. "But we can." The crowd turned to find themselves surrounded by silent Apache warriors who had materialized from the night like spirits. At their head rode Chief Longbow, his weathered face impassive in the torchlight. "You dare threaten my daughter?" The chief's voice was quiet yet carried to every ear. "You dare bring violence to the man who saved her life?" Confusion and fear rippled through the mob as they realized they were caught between Daniel's rifles and the Apache warriors. "This isn't your land," Slater blustered, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Nor is it yours. Chief Longbow replied calmly. Yet here we all stand, making choices that will determine whether blood soaks this ground tonight. His gaze swept the assembled men. Is that what you wish? To die here, far from your homes and families, over a woman none of you has ever met? The moment balanced on a knife's edge, tension vibrating through the air like heat from the torches. Several men in the mob exchanged uncertain glances, their resolve visibly wavering. They killed the Hendersons, someone called out. No, Daniel responded firmly. I rode to the Henderson place myself 2 days ago. They were killed with army rifles, not Apache weapons. Someone wants you to believe it was Apaches. This revelation sent another wave of uncertainty through the crowd. Daniel pressed his advantage. Think, men. Who benefits if settlers and Apaches start killing each other? Who's been trying to buy up land all through this valley? Eyes turned to Slater, whose face contorted with rage. Don't listen to him. He's turned against his own kind. My kind are decent men who don't murder innocents, Daniel replied evenly. My kind don't burn people out of their homes to steal their land. In the uncertain silence that followed, Kachina stepped onto the porch beside Daniel, her head held high. My father offers peace, she said, her voice clear and strong. Will you choose war instead? The simple question seemed to deflate something in the mob. One by one, men lowered their torches, unwilling to meet the steady gaze of either Kachina or the silent Apache warriors surrounding them. Slater, sensing his control slipping away, reached for his pistol with a curse, only to freeze as Chief Longbow's arrow appeared suddenly at his throat, the point dimpling the skin beneath his jaw. Choose wisely, the chief advised quietly. The fight drained from Slater like water from a broken vessel. This isn't over, he muttered, though the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. Yes, Daniel contradicted him. It is. As the mob dispersed, melting away into the darkness with muttered excuses and backward glances, Chief Longbow approached the house. His eyes moved from Daniel to Kachina and back again, taking in their unified stance. You have made your decision? He asked Daniel. Before Daniel could respond, Kachina spoke. Father, I wish to marry this man, not because you command it, but because I choose him. Her words sent a jolt through Daniel, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling beneath the weight of emotions he'd denied for too long. Looking at her now, proud and fearless beside him, he finally recognized the truth he'd been fighting since pulling her from the fire. He was already hers, had been from the moment their eyes met through the smoke. I choose her too, he said, the words opening something long closed within his chest. If she'll have me, knowing I'm stubborn and set in my ways. A rare smile touched Chief Longbow's weathered face. Then it is settled. He looked out over the ranch, then back at the couple. Not just a marriage of two people, but a bridge between worlds. The spirits have chosen wisely. Later that night, after the Apache warriors had departed with promises to return for the ceremony, Daniel and Kachina stood alone beneath the vast canopy of stars. The barriers between them had fallen away, leaving only truth in their place. I was wrong, Daniel admitted, taking her hand in his. All these years, I thought isolation was strength. But true strength lies in connection, in having something worth fighting for. Kachina's fingers tightened around his. And I feared your people would never see mine as equals. Yet here you stand, ready to build a life that embraces both worlds. Not my people and your people, Daniel corrected gently. Just people, making choices that define who they truly are. As he drew her into his arms, Daniel Hayes felt the last fragments of his false belief fall away. The frontier wasn't a place where love couldn't survive. It was a place where love was most essential, the only true shelter against hardship and danger. Spring, 1873. The Diamond H Ranch bloomed with new life. Gardens flourished where once there had been only dust, the crops planted according to Apache wisdom about the seasons and soil. Cattle grazed peacefully alongside horses bred from Apache stock, creating a stronger, hardier bloodline. Daniel stood on the porch of the ranch house, now expanded and brightened with colorful weavings and practical beauty. Beside him, Kachina cradled their infant son, his dark eyes already alert to the world around him. He has your determination, Daniel observed, gently stroking the baby's cheek. And your stubbornness, Kachina replied with a smile. A strong combination. From the distance came the sound of approaching riders, Chief Longbow, and several families from the Apache camp, arriving for the blessing ceremony. Behind them rode neighbors from surrounding ranches, their initial skepticism of the marriage having given way to respect as they witnessed the prosperity that union had brought. "Did you ever imagine this?" Daniel asked, gesturing to the thriving ranch and the diverse group approaching. "When your father made his impossible request?" Kachina's smile deepened as she leaned into her husband's embrace. "Not impossible, just waiting for the right hearts to make it possible." As they walked together to greet their guests, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought him from isolated survivor to the center of a community that bridged two worlds. The fire that had nearly claimed Kachina had instead forged something unbreakable, a love strong enough to transform not just two lives, but an entire valley. Where once there had been division, now stood a legacy of unity. Where fear had ruled, understanding now took root. And where a lonely man had once believed himself condemned to isolation, a family now thrived, proving that even in the harshest frontier, love could not only survive but flourish.